All right, so today we have Miss Jazmine Molloy. She is from Eagle Aerial. It is, you might have never heard of it, but she is a GIS solution specialist and software development manager for Eagle Aerial Solutions. And she's going to talk to you guys a little bit about what GIS is, what software they are developing, and how it actually connects to the utility company. So thank you for joining us, and I will give you the floor.
Great. Excellent. Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. Everyone can hear me all right? That's good. Let me get going on.
Yes, we can.
Perfect.
Yes.
I've got a slide deck here, so I'm going to share my screen. I want to make sure I can go into presentation mode. And we're doing all right. How's that looking for everybody?
Good.
We can see it.
Perfect. All right, great. Let me just get here. So again, my name is Jazmine Molloy, and I'm a GIS solution specialist and software development manager at Eagle. We've got quite a bit to talk about. I'm kind of excited to share this content with you guys today. Close to my heart, I've got high schoolers as well. And so this is really a great program that you guys are all participating in. So really fast, a little bit about me. Eagle Aerial is based out of Irvine, California, but I actually work remotely out of Southern Oregon and have been with the company for about 6 years. Some of my past experience includes working in national and international operational and logistical management capacities. But with Eagle, my main focus has been GIS-based web solutions and water management conservation for water conservation purposes, both in the private and public sector. And what I wanted to share with you guys today is a project that we're now concluding, but have been working on for over 2 years now for the state of California. And you know, the way it works from a STEM perspective and how it ties into a utility. So I'll kind of get going on that. So many of you have heard this, maybe you have, but that, you know, kind of that newer slogan that's being adopted, that water conservation is a way of life in California. And that's really what the state is working towards. And to kind of kickstart that new way of life or that shift there, there was some legislation passed back in 2018 and was signed by Governor Brown, and that's Assembly Bill 1668 and Senate Bill 606. And basically what this legislation, you know, to not get into the complicated ins and outs of it, you know, it says it requires that the State Water Board and the Department of Water Resources, I'm going to kind of read this verbatim, they are required to adopt water efficiency regulations that outlines requirements for urban water suppliers and specifies penalty for violations. Basically what it means is that the state needs to create a new set of regulations for the water agencies, the water purveyors, the utilities to follow that will basically enforce more conservation. Is kind of a simpler way to put it. And so what the state started was what they call the new water objective. And now the new water objective is comprised of multiple components. It is going to be a large formula that takes in different aspects of water use. So here we've got indoor water use, outdoor water use. There's a water loss component to that. There is a component, you know, that's called a variance, to where if there is something unique to your water district or utility that sets you outside of kind of the standards, you can add some specialty items in there. And then there are some bonuses, there's in credits for cities and utilities that are using recycled water. So that's just a really simple way to break down this really big formula that the state is going to use basically to calculate how much water each water agency, be that a city or a water district themselves or a utility, how much water they're going to be able to use. Where we step in, it's Eagle Aerial Solutions. We have a partner company that we work with on and for many projects, and especially this one as well, in V5. We come into this scenario in the outdoor component. And we were contracted by the state to work on their landscape area measurement project. So I was trying to put this in kind of a STEM perspective. We're using science, we're using technology, we're engineering and math throughout the whole thing. And it all starts with a problem that we have to solve, right? So this problem here is, how to analyze and classify the outdoor landscape for over 12 million residential parcels, according to the legislative requirements. So our solution was a custom methodology, and I'm going to get into that today, using GIS, remote sensing, some AI, which is really state of the art, and of course, some expert data analysts, photo interpreters, and engineers. Our team is quite large and varied. Everyone, expert in their own field. Oh, let me get this to shift. Here we go. So we'll start with, as I said, there'll be GIS, and, I'm going to kind of break down each one of those things. So what is GIS? So it's Geographic Information Systems. And I was, thinking of a really simple way to understand this is it really connects data to a map. And there are so many ways, and I really think for your generation, you will start hearing, if you haven't already begun to hear a lot about it, you will hear GIS more and more and more. GIS integrates where things are with what it's like there at that location. So again, location and data, maps and data. It's really kind of a simple way to break down what GIS is. So to kick off our project, we had to start off with some collections of data, and we had to get our map going. So what we did is we took some very sophisticated, pretty fancy imaging equipment, and we put it in an airplane, and we had it flown. We actually flew the entire state of California. So the plane goes in multiple billions of flight lines, where it's paths. It goes one way and comes back the other, and goes another way and comes back, collecting imagery on the ground. So that was step number one in our process here. So we're getting our map ready for the GIS work. The final project, after some post-processing and things like that, really looks like this. This is a vertical orthorectified image. This is in true color, and if you zoom in a little bit, this is what you're looking at. So this is what we flew across the state of California for the purposes of this project. But this imagery alone doesn't allow for us to go through our entire process and really understand what the landscape, what the vegetation, what is going on the ground in terms of landscaping and water use and vegetation. And that was really the goal of our project. We had to classify the outdoor landscape for all the residential parcels within the urban water districts and classify them depending on the type, the amount of water, how much it needed to be irrigated, if it was being irrigated, if it was potentially irrigated at some point, what kind of vegetation it is. So it's quite a process to start understanding that. So simply just with the imagery, we can have a map of what it looks like on the ground. We can do that, but we still can't define, what is below us. Just because it's green doesn't mean it's being watered. Just because it's brown doesn't mean it's not grass or something that could be watered. So we really had our work cut out for us. So at this step, we needed to jump in with some remote sensing techniques. And what is remote sensing? So this is a really, neat, science here. And it's the science and technology by which the characteristics of an object of interest, so here, the landscape, the outdoor landscape, can be identified, measured, or analyzed by the characteristics without direct contact. So we don't have to be on the ground to say, yep, over here we got some turf grass, and right here we've got a tree, and over here we got some rocks. So we were able to do it from these different methodologies, using GIS, using remote sensing, and I'm going to jump a little bit further in there. So as I put here on the slide, basically we can figure out what is on the ground without having to be on the ground. And here in the image, you can start to see a little bit of a glimpse into some of the remote sensing that we do, where you see the imagery behind it. And then what we're actually doing here is vegetation identification. So I'm going to move on. So this part, heads up everyone, it gets a little tricky in here, but hang tight with me and hopefully we'll get through this. So everyone's pretty used to looking at an image, similar to this first one. We call this true color imagery. And it may seem that it's easy for us to interpret because it comes up visually to us the way we're used to seeing it. We see green things over here that looks like the top of trees. So hey, that's tree canopy. This green stuff around the bottom, that looks like grass to me. Most grass is green, right? But what's interesting about imagery and to do this type of work is that true color imagery is actually consists of 3 independent bands. And so we collect the color of the imagery in red, green, and blue, referred to as RGB. So the standard 3-band imagery only collects data in visible wavelengths. So just the colors that we can see, which is a small portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. Again, I know I'm using kind of some bare words and it gets a little bit confusing, but we'll get there. So just looking at things the way we can visually see them does not satisfy the scientific needs to accurately assess the ground. So what we did is we added something called a near-infrared sensor to the camera equipment. It's referred to as a 4th band NIR. So the 4th band records the reflectance in wavelengths just outside the visible spectrum at the end of red. A good way to put this is it is what we can't see before, let me say this, when you have a remote control for your TV, you turn it on. A lot of things we do right there. The energy that's passed through there, that's not something that we can see. Those wavelengths from the remote control to the TV, we can't see. So from regular visible wavelengths to getting all the way over to things like remote controls. The near infrared is a little bit further over here. Let's hang on tight to that for a moment. So we're seeing things, we're able to collect data just outside of the visible spectrum, but this is why we use it. It is so interesting because it can actually pick up the reflection off of, so the reflectance off of vegetation. So the healthier and denser the vegetation, the higher the reflectance they give off in near infrared, especially when compared to visible light. So especially when we're looking at it through a lens in an aircraft above ground. And the reason why is because the chlorophyll in plants absorb visible light as an energy source for photosynthesis. So I'm going to break that down a little bit even more. Pretty wordy. Basically what it does is we are able to measure basically the moisture indexes of different types of vegetation, depending on how much reflectance we pick up with our camera equipment. That, getting further into those details, would be a lot longer, maybe a talk for another day, but it's really cool. So basically what happens here is that you take this first image on the left that we're all used to seeing, and the near infrared image is over here. And it's not even so much the image in those hues of red that we use, but it's the data derived from that reflectance off the vegetation. So we flew the state of California. we got some really great imagery. As we flew it and were able to capture what it looks like to, within to us visually in true color, what we're used to seeing, we were able to pick up different levels of moisture in the vegetation below. And we're going to hold on to that data. Remember, GIS is data and maps, right? So we're going to hold on to that data, the moisture information, and we're going to start our process. So we take that data and we actually created a custom deep learning model. So we started the use of AI, and this was something we custom created for each water agency. I know that Rob Whipple from Western is here on the call with us. So, for example, for Western, for their service area, we created, just like the other 400 agencies, we created a specific deep learning model that used the true color imagery and all of the data that we pulled with the near-infrared sensor of the moisture indexes on the ground. And we created a machine that begins to interpret the values and make sense of them. This is pretty cool. So I'm sure there's some questions, so I'll get through this, and when we get to the end, we can jump back and talk about this a little bit more. So what it allows us to do is it allows us to look at the imagery, put into our deep learning machine all the values from the near infrared, and the machine actually begins to break down. If you look at this, it almost looks like there's little puzzle pieces, break down different segments, so it's called segmentation, different areas on the ground that will be individually analyzed. There is a process here, and again, we won't have enough time to go into all of this, where we start to teach the machine pixel by pixel. We make super pixels is what we call them. I always kind of envision, this square pixel with the cape and standing up, with it flowing in the wind. But we create super pixels with true values, and we say, go find another pixel that looks just like you. And so it goes in the machine, it finds another pixel with similar moisture values and similar imagery data, and they start to buddy up. Again, it's this, and then that information comes back to our human team. We interpret that, we tweak it, we change it, we add to it, and we send the information back into the system. So in a really simplified way, it's this human and machine back and forth until we're able to accurately classify to the spec that's required by, by the legislation and everything by the state, classify the outdoor areas for all the residential parcels in all these urban water districts. Go to my next slide. So here it is, a good example of Western. So what we did here is this is a part of the service area there for Western, and we were able to put it through the full process, that I just spoke of, and analyze and classify the outdoor residential landscape. And produce out of that, what do? We produce a GIS database, data linked with maps, of what outdoor areas are using water. So what is their irrigation status and classification? This is how it's going to tie in to the utility. And at the end of the day, it ties into every single person on this call because all of us use water every single day. So whether Western is your water provider or not, it doesn't matter. If you live in the state of California, then this process that we've gone through directly affects your agency. Why is it so important? See, I'm even getting a little ahead of myself. Why is it so important to the water utility? So this legislation is going through its rollout and starting to go into its implementation phases, which means all of the components of the new water use objective are concluding and are being finalized. So again, if you remember, we were a part, this is indoor, outdoor, there's a water loss component, there's a variance component, and there's a credit for those who use recycled water in their service areas. But our part right here in the outdoor component is added to the overall equation, right? And this overall equation is going to be calculated, and basically they're going to tell, for example, Western, who I'm using here as my example, how much water can be used. So the accuracy, what I put on here in our work and for the outdoor component here is really important because it needs to accurately depict how water is being used outside of the home, so that that can be calculated in. And so next steps, I kind of wanted to leave you guys with, something to think about. I mean, really next steps here, which if we had longer to talk about, we could say, okay, let's keep using Western. So now Western has this data. The state has looked at it and they've calculated everything for Western. And now Western knows how many gallons of water they can use every year within their service area. So how to use GIS at a water utility to solve for the challenges surrounding water conservation and promote efficient water use. This is something more to take everything we did here, continue to apply GIS, and dive even deeper with how the utility can really leverage these different methods. Topic of discussion for another day. I, at this point, will open it for questions. I hope I did okay on time. It's 10:55. I hope I did it. So I open the floor. However you want to fire away with questions.
All right. Thank you so much. So I am going to look through the chat. So if you guys have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. If not, you can unmute yourself and ask away if you have a specific question.
One student did bring up the concept of an invasion of privacy, just
Sure.
looking at people's homes and everything. And so can you address that a little bit?
Great question. And I think it comes up for everybody when you talk about aerial imagery. And some people, do bring it up and some, it's a great question. So I'm just going to zoom back really fast. This image that you're looking at right here is it is a 6-inch resolution imagery. That means for every 6 square inches on the ground, that equals 1 pixel. So that's the resolution. And the zooming into 6-inch resolution imagery begins to blur at about 25 feet above the image. Now that's kind of still not quite getting there. So as you zoom even closer to the ground, images blur. And this is a vertical image. This is something that we're not looking in windows. It doesn't come in from the side. So we look straight up and down and is used only for official mapping purposes. So I give you the background on what kind of a photograph this is, what kind of imagery this is, so that we're not, this is not something where we are zooming down in to see what brand of jeans somebody's wearing or what kind of hoodie they have on, something like that. But it does exist for these purposes. As far as invasion of privacy, how that works, I'm probably not the right one to kind of even talk about, or speak to it too much. But I think it's on everyone's mind. But this is how we're able to work for the state to understand the outdoor landscape. But I hope there's a bit of a comforting aspect to that. In that it's not used to, our planes aren't coming, it's actually called an oblique angle where you're looking at sideways at stuff. It's straight up and down for mapping purposes.
All right, and then we have, would you recommend any technological changes or advancements for the GIS or your job in general?
Technological advances? Would I recommend any? It's a great question. In GIS, as I mentioned kind of in the beginning, especially for this generation, you're going to hear GIS more and more and more. And together with like remote sensing and being able to do so much more from aerial imagery, from near infrared data that can be that technology is moving forward so quickly that I think that my best response is to continue to move it forward, but to be cautious in fully automated systems. Going 100% into AI, I think that there is always a need for human interaction. There's always a need for some human interpretation. So there's a lot of that. That's really where everything's pushing, is trying to make things as automated as possible. Have machines do it, on their own. You have to continually teach these machines, and the technology is astounding. And I think there just always needs to be that human interpretation and all of that. So I know that's not really, do I have a recommendation on the advancements? It's moving so quickly. So it's almost like, okay, keep up with it because it's moving so quick, and don't let it get too far ahead to where we miss really important details.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Our time is up. We appreciate your presentation and teaching our students all about GIS. I hope you all got an understanding of it. And so I just want to thank you for your time.
Oh, happy to be on. And I think my email's on there. If anyone has a question and would like to email me at a different time, happy to jump on a call or chat, whatever it is. And I'll send over a PDF version of my slide deck if anyone wants to take a look at it. That's open book over here. I'm excited. You guys keep going.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Take care.